Hello and welcome back to Mixed Up. Now, I am not Nicole and I am not Emma. I'm Isabella Silvers. I'm a journalist and the founder of Mixed Messages. And I'm here today to speak to these two very special ladies about their book, The Half of It. Get your copy now. I am thrilled to be diving into the themes of this book. We're going to talk about hair, we're going to talk about adoption, we're going to talk about mixed stereotypes. It's going to be amazing. So settle down, get ready, and let's dive in. So take me back. When did Emma and Nicole become mixed up? When did you meet? What brought you together? Because I actually don't think I know this story, and I've had the pleasure of knowing both of you for a few years now.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I contacted Nicole because I was working on a sustainability project, a fashion sustainability project, and this was way back when this was like 2018.
Yeah.
And at the time, well, it was in it. Do you know what? It was in the world of like fashion, secondhand, and sustainability.
Yeah.
And at the time, there weren't really many influencers that were talking about secondhand fashion, secondhand shopping, and sustainable fashion. And I basically wanted to do a project called Come Secondhand Shopping with Me, where I would take influencers secondhand shopping. And my hope was that they would love it so much that they would then just be addicted and start spreading the word of how amazing secondhand shopping was.
Yeah.
So I'd actually asked Nicole out for a drink because I thought that she would be great for this project.
We know she loves to shop.
It's true.
But yeah, so basically I'd asked her out for a drink and we'd gone out and we were supposed to be talking about this project. And to be honest, within a few minutes, we started talking about being mixed and we didn't stop.
So we haven't stopped since
we haven't
2018.
evidently. And we kind of, during the course of the evening, because this was our afternoon.
Yeah, we were together for like the whole day, I think, at that point.
Yeah, and we at some point during the evening mentioned doing a podcast, and we made it real.
Yeah.
I remember throughout the pandemic, I would go on my daily walk, my mental health walk, and I'd be listening to the podcast. And so you two like soundtracked so much of that dark time for me.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's gone on to be so phenomenal. There's, like I've already mentioned, you know, the amount of topics you cover. You've looked at domestic abuse, you've looked at hair, you've looked at texturism, colorism, you've looked at adoption, interracial dating, having a white mother. You know, you've really gone in deep, and there's clearly so much to the conversation, hence the book. So take me, how did it go from the podcast to the book? And what's that been like for both of you?
Well, so we got the book deal. So like you mentioned, we started the podcast. We started recording before lockdown, but we released episodes coincidentally around that time. Obviously it wasn't planned, but we were at home, so we were like, well, now we have no excuse but to get to work on this. And then from that point, not long after we started releasing our episodes, was obviously when George Floyd was tragically murdered. And we were I would say we were kind of in that wave of people who got approached to do a book in 2020. And so we were approached by HarperCollins to do this project, and we naturally said yes. It was something that I think both of us knew that we were, I mean, as writers ourselves, we dreamed of doing a book. We didn't think it would come about so soon, but it was really exciting to be able to say yes to this and again be able to go really deep into the topics that we discuss on the podcast in written form. So yeah.
And you have gone deep. You've really, you know, we talk about in the book, and as people will know from your latest season, where all the episodes even are linked to chapters in the book. You're looking at beauty standards. You're looking at a lot of kind of history, the tragic mulatto myth. You're looking at passing and presenting and all these conversations. Have you felt like you've gone deeper and taken what you've learned from the podcast to really develop that into a book that, you know, like I've said, I feel like it's like the podcast on a page. Like I'm laughing with you, I'm crying with you, I'm learning. But do you feel like you've kind of brought that and drilled down into that for the book?
I love that you said that it's like the podcast on a page. I think, you know what? It's really hard to know where the podcast ends and the book starts, where like we end and start and this body of work begins, because it's really been something that's kind of grown organically from, like you said, the conversations we've had. But, you know, each conversation will spark something new, and we'll find something out and then be like, okay, we need to investigate this more. Nobody seems to be talking about this. And that I think the book, to be honest, is actually more of an extension of the podcast, because I think the book allows us to go a lot deeper. Because obviously when we talk to people on the podcast, we're focused on their personal experiences, and like we can extrapolate a bit from that. But this is much broader. You know, we've been able to really look at kind of global themes that reoccur across history and across time, and I think that's been really key for me anyway, for my understanding of how everything links together.
Yeah, definitely. I think allowing ourselves to do so much more research. I think like you were saying, obviously we get so much one-to-one with people, which is fantastic. And again, even just hearing from people, listeners in the DMs and things like that, hearing their stories, but being able to go back and do the reading, do the academic research as well, because there have been so many amazing people who have been researching this topic over the years. And I think what was something that really stood out to me was like, this was something that's been here for such a long time, but nobody ever really, no one's that open about it. And so, yeah, that was really exciting to be able to get into it in the book. So,
I think that's the other thing. I think, you know, we know, because obviously we've done so much research for the book, that there are like academic studies and there's journals that you can read to find out about the mixed experience, but there's not really anything in the mainstream. Like it's still quite, I would say it's like still quite an early conversation.
I always say that the mixed conversation, I feel like we've come out of the childhood, and I always say we're now in the adolescence, like with all of those growing pains and all of those mood swings and all of that drama. Like we're not in the adulthood, but we're getting there, and books like this are so important for contributing to that and allowing people to read and understand more. And I feel
really
like
is.
now there's such an appetite to talk about mixedness, but there never was with, I mean, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like there was with our parents. But friends of mine who are having kids, they want to talk about it with their kids.
Yeah, for sure.
But do you think the appetite's just still within mixed people's conversations and within like those interracial family dynamics, rather than, do you think that there's a mainstream calling for the topic?
Not yet, you know. I think people sometimes group the conversation about mixed identity in with anti-racism, and this is something that, you know, me and Nicole have spoken about. And yes, that's a part of it, of course, not of course, but you know, we've predominantly experienced racism and experienced prejudice and discrimination, but I don't quite think monoracial people from all races, and I'm generalizing, but that's all I can do is speak from my own experience and generalize. I don't think they understand that there's a lot more going on. So I think you're right. I think the people that approach me and approach you are probably mixed people, people with mixed families, people with mixed partners, etc. But yeah, I don't think it's there yet. What are you hoping for with the book? Like, who has kind of shown the most interest in it? Is it kind of mixed listeners and mixed people?
I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, the mixed community is a strong one. I think so many people again are always looking for something that speaks to them and not necessarily speaks to their own personal experiences, but again, like even when we have interviewed people for the book, for example, there's so much I just didn't know, and I think people are looking for that knowledge. But yeah, I've definitely had a lot of parents ask me about the book, a lot of white mothers in particular. They're very interested in kind of understanding their children and themselves a lot better, and their partners as well, which I find really, really interesting. Because I think the stereotype is that white people don't want to know those things, but there are definitely people who are seeking that kind of information out. But yeah, I mean, I think for the most part it is mixed people. But we so often say it's a conversation that everyone's involved in, because I mean we're all part of it. Like we're all affected by these things. So yeah.
I think it's an interesting one because people surprise me all the time. Like I went to do a speaking engagement up north recently, and one of the other panel speakers, a man in his 60s who is predominantly focused on sustainability and fashion when it comes to work. He wanted to have a pre-call with me and we ended up chatting, and he asked me about the book and I told him about the book, and then he sent me an email after we got off the call saying, I've just pre-ordered your book. I
love that.
And this is an older white man in his 60s who, you know, from a career perspective, you wouldn't necessarily, this doesn't really interact with his day-to-day work. And I just found it really interesting that he was already so invested in a short conversation that we'd had about this book. And he literally, he said, I've pre-ordered it. One of my, I think this is telling, he was like, one of my closest friends has mixed Indian, British, white daughters. Big up. And he was like, I wanna learn more. And so I think actually there is something in being really open to the idea that actually a lot more people are interested in this than you might think. And at the end of the day, we are the fastest growing demographic. And so whilst, it's not a mainstream conversation, it is something that touches so many people's lives.
What's coming up? We need everyone to buy this for Christmas, for birthdays. We need it to be in everyone's stocking. Like, this is a sign to every listener. Like, literally get it out. What's coming up? Bonfire night? Why not Halloween? Like, let's get it.
Black History Month.
Black History Month. South Asian Heritage Month.
Exactly.
Guys, listeners, do your duty.
All I can think of with Bonfire Night is burning books.
I know.
No, don't do that.
Maybe not for that.
Maybe if it ups sales, I don't know.
No burning the book.
Don't burn the book. Don't burn the book. It's too beautiful. I mean, look at this cover. It's so good.
Thank you.
And in the book as well, we kind of touched on research and academic history. And I think that's so important for understanding where we are today. And there's so many kind of jokes and comments about if you've got a white mum, you're crazy, you know, that mixed girls are crazy. There's fetishization of mixed. I think, you know, I'm speaking predominantly, I think this stands for black and white women, but I'm sure it extends across different mixes as well. There's all of these, you know, little comments about, I saw a tweet once or an ex that was like, before I start listening to Cleo Soul, who's phenomenal and I love her music,
She's my fave.
Let me check if she's a crazy biracial or like and it's just
let me not get ready to swing my handbag for Cleo.
You should be lucky you're not on Twitter.
She thanks God every day because the way I have to report to her about what people are saying. I'm glad I missed that tweet because
so let's just
really
break
annoying.
this down. So this person's essentially saying that they don't want to listen to Cleo
if she has a white mom, because that would make her a crazy biracial.
Right.
And it's, you know, some people do let the side down slightly, Drake. But, you know, there's all these stereotypes and these comments, and there's been a whole conversation about Tyler and like people like demanding, you know, saying she's not black or anyway, there's all of this going on. And so my point is there's so much research, and it's important to understand that all these little jokes and all these little comments and all these stereotypes come from such a deep place. So why was it important for you to have so much kind of history and research in the book? And did you learn things that you didn't know as well from researching the different chapters?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, in short, yes, there was so much. I was somewhat aware of, and then again doing the research and the reading behind um, all of those key moments, those key points in history really made me understand where all of this comes from. And again, I think the whole point is that all of these little comments and all of these jokes and stereotypes are, of course, rooted in racism. They're rooted in a racialization of mixed people. So, like, the idea that someone can be a crazy biracial comes from the tragic mulatto myth, like you mentioned, at the beginning of the episode, which is one of our chapters. And I don't think a lot of people really know about that as a trope.
I don't think they do. I don't think they know what they're saying.
In fact, we need to break it down for the people.
Yeah.
Okay, history lesson.
History lesson.
Miss Okran, please educate me.
So basically, this is a literary trope, or it began as a literary trope back during antebellum America and slavery times. And it was essentially starting off as a way to, in text, discourage people from racial mixing, because the result of that racial mixing would be a child, usually a young mixed girl, a young mulatto girl, who was depressed. She could potentially have alcohol problems. She could be abusing. She could be sexually promiscuous. All of these things, and this is something that has then since extended throughout film. It's now extending through TV. It's still something that we see today. But that's where it began. And again, these jokes about the crazy biracial, and things like, oh, that explains her craziness is because she has a white mother or a white parent, for example, doesn't understand herself. She doesn't know what to do. She's confused. She's lost. She's depressed. All of those things are just like where we get this this Twitter vitriol from, and Reddit vitriol. And it extends to other mixes as well, but it started again with this black and white mix and this discouraging of racial mixing. So yeah.
The whole idea of this character is that the character is so much in conflict because the black and the white cannot sit together, that they become crazy. Like, they lose their mind. And this character pops up throughout literature.
Yeah, we see it in Pride and Prejudice.
But yeah, essentially this character pops up again and again in literature, and then actually once you understand the character, you can't unsee the character in modern film and in really quite recent TV and series. The character just comes up again and again, and it's literally the root of so many of these stereotypes and what people probably think is like bants on social, but is actually rooted in quite serious racist
text.
It's wild, and I hate seeing this conversation online. And this is why I think people need the book so much, because then if they perhaps understand, it's similar. So I'm not disabled, but I read books by disabled authors because I really want to know what that experience is like. So I know I can catch myself out if I've got stereotypes or preconceptions. So it's important for people to hear from own voices. Which again is something that you do so well. You bring in voices from your listeners and you bring in all your past guests. And again, I think it really shows that there's not just one way to be mixed. I know we've all interviewed people, I've interviewed people whose opinions are different to mine. And it's kind of been challenging in a good way, because it makes me see that we don't all think the same way. So again, was that something that was kind of from the get-go vital for you to bring in all these other experiences?
Yeah, definitely. We said from the get-go, even with the podcast itself, that we wanted to make sure that people didn't, that our work didn't reinforce the idea that being mixed is being mixed black and white, because obviously that's not the case. And there's such a diverse range, like you're saying, of people's experiences and mixes. And it was really important for us to try and represent that. It's not always been easy because obviously we've had to do hundreds and hundreds of interviews and try to talk to people all over the world, time zones. But it was something that was really important to us.
And I think another topic as well that, again, you touch on in the book, it's a wide-reaching book, guys. There's a lot in there. Is something that has weirded me out for a very long time. And it's this fetishization of mixed children. And again, as we've just spoken about, I think it goes back to this kind of, well, two things. It goes back to slavery, like you were saying. It goes back to colorism. It goes back to all of this. But the fact that there's whole Instagram accounts dedicated to like pictures of cute kids, and I find it weird because it's almost like these kids are supposedly cute because they're not too black or they're not too Asian or that, you know, always disagree with me, but that's how it feels to me. And I wonder what you felt when researching that and writing that chapter, and just from what you've seen on socials as well, this kind of idealized child that because they're mixed, they're beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely speak to seeing some very bizarre things. Obviously, those accounts in general, I find strange because they're also often really edited as well.
Yeah.
So
like
it's like
super green
super,
eyes.
exactly, in this almost kind of like freak show kind of way.
Do we think they have good intentions?
I think we need to circle back to that question after we.
Yeah.
I'm just because I know you so well. I know
but I think
train of thought.
I think that but what I've seen recently, I saw a TikTok of I saw a TikTok of a white mother, and I think she said her husband is Vietnamese or Thai or something. And she was like, if you're mixed, can you please stitch this video? Because I want to know what my kids are going to look like. And I think I want to say something like that is well-intentioned. But then the stitches that I then came across of other mixed children were very like, this has made me feel very uncomfortable because it's shining a spotlight on them in a way that, again, is completely fetishized. It's like, I want to know how beautiful my kids are going to look, or I want to know that, like, you know, because I've got blonde hair and green eyes, like, what does that mean? But I think ultimately it's putting children on this kind of pedestal that, like, they just don't need to be on. I think talking about how kids look in that way is just like really inappropriate. But yeah, I think so much of it is again rooted in racism, that starts from very early on. And like, for example, when we get into the interracial relationships and dating chapter, so much of that fetishization is an extension of that. And again, is not something that people really consider. They just think like, oh, my kid's gonna have like green eyes or whatever. But they don't know what they're implying when they point those things out, when they point those features out.
It's that, isn't it? Like, they don't know what they're saying. It's kind of like the two things can be true. They could be well-intentioned, but incredibly misguided.
You can be curious, exactly.
Yeah.
You can, of course, we all want cute kids, and like all kids are beautiful, but like why are we putting that kind of focus on children? I think is for me has made me deeply uncomfortable many times.
Yeah, I think all these things as well are connected, and that for me is why this book was such an important work to do, and to kind of the process to go through, because you can like I said, piece things together. Like that fetishization is so connected to this idea of beauty standards and pretty privilege, and how, like, you know, we are considered in the world as being mixed race and being connected to those things, but how actually it's not a desirable thing to be fetishized. And I don't know that people understand the difference between fetishizing somebody and actually, you know,
just desiring them
or appreciating them is probably the best way to put it. And the issue is that, you know, it's not desirable. Like I don't desire to be
It's not a
fetishized.
compliment.
It's not a
Yeah.
compliment,
Yeah.
and it's not a privilege. Like it's really not. Like it's not something that I would like
to
to.
happen.
Yeah.
Because we've spoken about this as well, you and I, Izzy, because, you know, when I was growing up, oftentimes people, when they were questioning, you know, my heritage,
Yeah.
why I look the way that I do, and
Why
I
are
would
you
explain,
brown?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why are you brown? And yeah, explaining like to people, or people wanting an explanation for why I look the way that I do. And then explaining, oh, you know, my dad is from Ghana, my mom's from the Philippines, and they're like, oh, well, that's why you're beautiful, or that's why you're pretty, or that's why your hair is like that. When you're hearing that as a child, like, and child me was basically like, oh, okay, like the Filipino-ness is able to kind of water down the parts of me that wouldn't be considered beautiful, and explains to them, oh, okay, well, now that makes sense to me in my mind. And so, like, yeah, like Emma's saying, none of it's a compliment. None of it makes me feel pretty or beautiful or attractive. It just makes me feel pissed off.
I think also, like, when you grow up in a predominantly white environment,
Yeah.
like, you're not really getting those messages.
You're
of, like,
so not getting those messages of
beauty and-
you're so
and,
beautiful.
prettiness and
Yeah,
attractiveness
exactly.
anyway. So then, like,
Yeah.
I think I remember, like, one of my first interactions with a boy who was attracted to me.
The way I saw in your eyes, you were like, how do I describe?
And like, because actually, like, that's what it boils down to. Like,
Yeah.
I was basically fetishized by this teenage boy who
Yeah.
literally said to me, we look good together. Like, your skin looks good with my skin.
Oh my god.
And I still remember, I really
Yeah.
deeply remember that to this day.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically, and then the next person that I came across, or boyfriend, shall I say, that I had, actually told me that I was his
I'm about to die. What?
Ashanti.
I'm dead.
Oh.
Yeah, so like, I just bring up these examples, not just to shame these boys,
But also just a little bit that.
but a little bit maybe. But like also like, you know, I am talking about like teenagerdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I can extend some grace, but you know, this is what it looks like. Like this is not people being attracted to you and you know, finding you attractive. This is people fetishizing you.
Yeah. And like you say, there's, you know, people are attracted to whoever they want to be attracted to, but like there's, you know, as a young, like hearing that, you're meant to read that as a compliment, being someone's Ashanti, but like you sorry, even saying that is really wild, but you can tell there's not a lot of like care and consideration for like who you actually are as a person. It's just kind of like, oh,
As much
you
as
could
I-
slot in any other person here
Yeah,
into this job, like great.
Yeah, as much as I love Ashanti,
Yeah.
and did at the time,
Exactly.
like we couldn't be further
Yeah, exactly.
further removed
I was
from one
gonna
another.
say.
So
Love Ashanti down, but I don't know, and you, but I don't know that I see the connection.
yeah, so what's been going on? Tell me.
Oh, not so much. I mean, you know a little bit about my dating woes. And I was seeing this guy for a bit, and yeah, it was really nice. We'd been going on a few dates, but then for the last maybe a couple of months, and yeah, unfortunately, I got unceremoniously dumped recently, and she's back. She's back on the streets. That's my update.
Oh no!
Really? Yeah.
Not the unceremonious dumping.
It was very out of the blue, I can't lie. I was surprised. I felt a little bit blindsided, but you know, we move as usual. We can't let these things get us down. So
I'm stressed for you since we did our dating episode. Anyway,
I know. It's hard being a lover girl. I need people to feel sorry for me. No, it's good. It's like I'm seeing it as a net positive because it was fun while it lasted. It's summer now. And that means I get to spend more time with you and friends, and we can like go outside, do a little bit of people watching, have a little bev, and enjoy.
Yeah, I'm here for that. And I'm your wing woman. You know that. I'm ready to go. I will get those wing woman gladrags on and I'm at your
Yes.
service.
That's what I need. I need my wing woman on side. I need that little confidence boost. I can't even lie because yeah, I was like, sometimes the self-confidence takes a little hit. So yeah, it's good for us to get together and team up.
We do need to team up, given all the kind of under his eye, blessed be the fruit nonsense that's been going on with the dating apps and and all of that jazz. So
That's so true. They are definitely on their way out. That's for sure.
yeah, it's got to be like an in real life outside affair, I think.
Absolutely. And I think anybody that knows us though and has listened to the podcast or anyone who follows us on social knows that we are outside. We love to share a little glass of wine together, people watch, just enjoy living, laughing, loving.
Yeah, in fact, the first time we met, we actually shared a rosé. Do you remember?
I do. Yeah, it's so cute for us. That was our first date.
It was our little keep me, and now we're married.
Exactly. We are together forever. But yeah, I'm actually enjoying a little bit of a little rosé now,
Are
which is
you?
divine. Yes.
Tell us what you're drinking.
I'm drinking the Uncommon's Eleanor rosé, and it's delicious.
And this feels like a good time to let you know that we are really thrilled that today's episode is sponsored by The Uncommon. I'm particularly happy to partner with The Uncommon Wines, as you know how much I love a B Corp brand, and they happen to be the first ever B Corp winemaker in the UK, which means they consider the benefit of people and planet in everything they do. For example, to minimise impacts, their wines are all packaged in aluminium cans, which are endlessly recyclable and have a carbon footprint 86% lower than a traditional glass bottle.
An English wine that's good for the planet and easy to pack for picnics and festivals now that summer is finally here. It's rosé season, and the Uncommon's Eleanor is a light and bright rosé overflowing with red summer fruits that's almost impossible to sip, so we recommend you savor. I don't know about you, but I'm picturing myself at a garden party or a summer barbecue with a perfectly chilled rosé in hand. You can purchase The Uncommon at wearetheuncommon.co.uk and use our code MIXEDUP30, which gives you 30% off anything on the webshop.
I'm about to take it down a notch. I'm about to get serious.
Okay.
Because something that I really wanted to talk to you both about, and the number one thing that stuck out in the book for me, and to give context, there's been a lot on social and there's been a lot happening. Cleo Sol, crazy biracial. Are these people really black? If you're mixed, are you really black? Is she really Korean? Is she really Indian? All these things.
Right.
And there's been a lot of noise about mixed people, not being fully part of the culture or not being seen as black. Meghan Markle, there's been all these conversations, but there's a part in the book where you speak about a young woman, I believe it was, who was driving just in a car, and a group of people or a couple of people came up and set her on fire. And that was a racially motivated attack. And she was mixed. But in that moment, I do not believe that those people thought, oh, she's half white. I don't think they hesitated at her being half white and thought, oh, should we leave that? They went straight for it and ultimately did what they did. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that type of conversation. And again, I know it's something that you delve into a little bit, but the perceptions of, and I think, again, I'm saying this is predominantly, I've seen this conversation in black spaces, but I know it happens for Japanese people as well. But yeah, from your experience, what have you kind of seen, and what do you think people miss when they say things like that?
Yeah, that's such a big question, and it's often so hard to talk about, I think, because especially when I was a young person, I was so desperately trying to kind of um make my way and like find my footing in black spaces or in black culture in a way that felt like again, I wasn't someone who was gonna be shut out from the conversation, or I wasn't someone who was gonna be told that I can't say anything. So that story in particular was something that happened again, like not long after the murder of George Floyd, when that girl was set on fire in her car. And there was, of course, after something like that, which is a racially motivated attack, there tends to be more of those. That's just something that ends up happening, I think. But ultimately, I felt like this was something that not a lot of people really considered. The idea that this mixed girl is going to be racialized as Black regardless. And like you were saying before, her whiteness in this instance is not anything that's going to save her. It's not anything that prevents any harm coming her way. But I do often think the assumption is, that with the privilege that we hold, whether it's, again, the lightness of our skin, our hair texture, etc., is that somehow kind of couches us in this, little bubble of protection that I find, and that we have found in writing this book, ultimately doesn't exist. So,
Look, everything's contextual, and I think, because we were talking about fetishization, and we were talking about, and what's linked to that is sexualization. And we've recently seen this case with a woman called Ella, who was essentially raped, sexually assaulted by her therapist. And the way in which the case has been discussed, the way that she's been discussed, the way that things have been dissected, very much has these like racial undertones, tones permeating throughout that are, they are connected. It is that intersection of race, and it is that kind of trope raising its head again of like the tragic mulatto, which is also, that trope is heavily sexualized as well. And I think, it's important to kind of try and look at these things in context and as connected. Because in these moments we're not, exempt from this kind of racism and these disgusting attacks.
And like you say, like, it's all with context, and we know, and I think sometimes there's this assumption that as mixed people we aren't aware of what's appropriate and when it's appropriate to have conversations. And I think there are spaces where, of course, I always use the example of, if a dark-skinned Black actress is talking about her experience in the industry, is it always appropriate for someone who's lighter skinned to say, me too, I'm experiencing the same thing? It's same but different, and it's part of the same conversation. But of course there's levels, and there's colorism, texturism. And that's why I think creating spaces like Mixed Up, like the book, like the community that you've kind of garnered with your audience is so important, because this is where we can have those conversations, and they need to be had, because like I say, we're in our growing pain adolescent stage and we need to get all these emotions out, because we don't know what's going on, and it's so important. And I think sometimes people think, as mixed people, we just want to talk about it all the time, but we, at least for us three at this table, we are aware of when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. And I think that's important to point out as well. You can order the half of it right now. The link is in the show notes, so make sure you do that immediately. Another thing as well that has come through recently in film as well, there was a recent, I say recent, it's probably a few years ago now, but adaptation of Nella Larsen's Passing. And passing, I say in my Birmingham accent. I can't say passing. It feels weird to me. But passing and presenting is something that we've spoken about so much. And, for someone like me, I kind of sometimes call myself white presenting. I don't like passing. I know you don't either, but
Why don't you like it? Tell us.
I feel like passing, it's hard. I am half white. So for people who don't know my mix, I'm half Punjabi, Indian, and half white. I am half white, but passing, I don't feel like I'm white, because I've been called the P word. I've been called a maggot. I've been told to go back to my country. I've been told to all these things, you know. So I don't see myself as white, and I don't feel like I'm seen as white. I think I'm seen as like a question mark. People are always like, are you Italian, are you Spanish, are you something? But presenting feels more like it puts the onus on other people and less on me.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk to me about passing and presenting and your thoughts, because it's something that it's not always wanted. People don't always want to pass or present. Some people do, and historically they needed to for safety, but it's so individual. But what are your thoughts on it?
Do you want to go, or shall
I think you should take this.
I know you have thoughts, Emma.
Well, I worked a lot on this chapter, so I'm quite close to it, and I think, you know, you made a good point, which is that term really comes from, again, antebellum slavery and antebellum America, which is like post slavery, and like this idea of escaping slavery through not being perceived as being black. And through not being perceived as being black, you could then, and also owning that kind of identity, you could then you could be free. Because if you could escape and you could be white in the eyes of others, you could be free. Whereas if you were not white at that time, then obviously you were likely to be enslaved. And I think the term, when it's used today, is still used very much in the same way when it's thrown out as a identity marker from one person to another. It still seems to hold and levy the same kind of accusation, which is that you yourself are active in this passing. Whereas for me, I think that, having spoken to so many people about this who have been, you know, seen as white or present as white, or who are perceived as white, they most of the time don't want to be seen as white. They understand that holds certain privileges, and throughout their lives they may have felt that at certain points. And even some of them have maybe have been quite confused about that, and at certain points maybe they've lent into it more than others. But a lot of people have told me that they desperately want to be, for example, somebody we had on the podcast who gave us a wonderful contribution for an episode, also contributed to the book, and she said she desperately wants to be seen as Indian.
When I read that, I was like, is this me? Did I say that? Because
It's not you, babe.
But 100%, I feel the same.
And she was like, the people I look up to most in my life are my grandma, my mum, my sisters. You know, I want to look like them. I want to be recognised as Indian. I want to be seen as part of my family. I don't want people to question me and tell me that I don't look like my family and I can't possibly be part of my family. And, you know, this is just one of many, many examples. But most of the people that I've spoken to want to be seen as a whole, and B, you know, they want their ancestry to be obvious to people. If they could choose, then that's what they would want. So it's interesting that we have this phenomenon within society where people still feel like it's incumbent on them to label somebody else with this label, which has so much, like, it carries so much in it.
It's so loaded.
It's loaded, and it's really loaded. And so I think it's good to hear from people who experience this. I can't speak to this because I can't say that anyone's ever accused me of.
But I think it's also something, like you say, you know, no one's accused you, but people have accused me. And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of these terms just get lumped together again as a full mixed race, either experience or like as a way to kind of
like it's seen as synonymous.
Exactly, it's seen as synonymous. That's what I'm looking for. Exactly.
Let me not even get started
as
on ambiguous, because I have a whole.
like it's like ambiguous, light skin, passing, like all of these words are used somehow interchangeably nowadays, and I find
Yes.
that really strange because again, it's like there's no like it's a free for all
Yeah.
at this point.
Can I please come back on the podcast and can we do a whole episode on ambiguous ethnicity? Because
Of course,
the
yes.
words I have to say about this, we do not have the time, but just know it. Just know it's in
Just
me.
know we're ready.
But kind of on that, semi-ish, I feel like there's a fluidity in the way that we can sometimes present ourselves or just want to be. Like I'm sure when you're with Filipino family, you lean more into that. And so many people I've interviewed on mixed messages as well say the same. Like it's just kind of it's not code switching to them. It kind of is, but it's not, again, it's not active. It's just like an unconscious of being more, I don't know, like even like hand gestures and things. I know like I will do more Indian hand gestures maybe when I'm with that family. But so do you think there's this fluid sense in both of you as well? And again, I know it's something that you cover, but it's okay to feel more this one day, more that another day. How do you both feel about that?
I mean, yeah, I think for me personally, that's so the story of my life. I think there are so many times when I am, especially now that I live so far away from my parents, that I do feel again a sense of wanting to belong somewhere. And so again, when like in a predominantly Asian space, for example, I feel so like, oh my gosh, like am I being seen? Like, do people know why I'm here? Like, will they understand and get it? And same like when I'm with my Ghanaian family here in London, I'm so thrilled to be out and like around with them and like have people understand that like this is my family. I think it's such again like I think a hangover from childhood of like wanting people to understand who your family is, and like I don't think a lot of people understand the rejection that comes from that and like stays with you. But for me, it's such a celebration of like how much I love these people. And so when people can recognize that in me, especially being, I mean, especially being in an Asian space, because I don't get to be in those spaces very often, um, I'm so happy. Like, I'm so thrilled. And you're right. For me, it's not about deciding today that I'm Asian, even though I'll make a joke about it.
She's Asian
I'm Asian
today.
today. But it is again that it's just that feeling of being seen. It's that feeling of being around things and people and conversations and hearing music or playing games or whatever that remind me of being at home. So yeah, that's all it's really about for me.
And is it slightly different for you, Emma, given I guess your family makeup when you were growing up?
Not really. I think all mixed people have a sense of fluidity when it comes to their identity, because at the end of the day, like, we're racialized how we're racialized. I've always been racialized as black my entire life. Like, so it's irrelevant, like, to some extent, what my family makeup is, to be frank. And also, like, I'm married to a Nigerian man. I have a Nigerian family as well. Like, so, you know, I'm also an honorary Nigerian. Like, that is for real. You know, and so like all of those things about myself, I want to celebrate too. And I think it's just pride, and
That's the word.
it's, you know, something that people, I think when people face this idea of like that they're cosplaying or pretending, or
I love the way me and Nicole are just like, yeah.
Have you seen that? Sorry, off topic, but have you seen that meme? It was like women doing a podcast and they're like,
exactly that.
I'm just like, that is so accurate. Anyways,
Because it's a hard agree for me.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, I think that so often we have this kind of charge levied at us that we're doing too much, or we're you know, like trying too hard. And it's just, I think it's funny because actually most of the time, I think we're just enjoying ourselves.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Just
throwing
enjoying.
ourselves into being whatever part of us is
exactly.
present in the room with us. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, you know, I do understand that certain people feel that we get to choose.
Yeah.
And choice isn't something everybody has the liberty of or the privilege of. And that is something you have to understand as a mixed person.
Yeah.
When somebody's irritated or frustrated with like the way that you're moving through life,
Right.
it probably has to do with the fact that, you know, they are seeing that element of choice as something that they don't have. And that makes sense, and that's also valid. Like, that's a valid feeling.
Sure.
I think it's just that it would be really nice if people understood a bit more about like what that fluidity looks like and where it comes from and why that is also valid. And also there are moments where there is no choice.
Oh, for sure.
And I hope that this book kind of illuminates people on more of that.
Well, you've jumped ahead to my last question, which is, what do you want people to take from the book? You know, there's so much in there. What's, I guess, the one thing, and Emma, you might have already answered, feel free to repeat yourself, but what do you want people to take from the half of it?
I think for me, it's probably a sense of just openness, openness to hearing other conversations that you may not have heard before, and experiences. I think, again, there's so much I've learned in just being able to speak to people for this book, and whether that's history or whether that's anecdotal, whether that's just feeling, because I think so often the conversations around race and identity can lack in empathy. And that's something for me that's been a big part of this project, is the way that also Emma and I have received so much empathy and like understanding and like just so much from people. People are so giving to us, which has been incredible, in the stories that they've shared. And so yeah, so I think if people are able to take that emotion with them and kind of extend it out, that would be great. I would love that.
I think because I'm a total geek, I want people to have the same aha moments that I've had, like piecing together like the politics that we're seeing play out in history and like up until today. Like, for example, Nicole sent me this the video that's gone viral with Moya.
Yes.
Interviewing a woman on the street about the election.
Yes.
And the woman legit starts talking about Enoch Powell.
Yeah.
Now, we had this moment when we were doing the editing of our book where our editor asked us to remove the references to Enoch Powell because he was like, is it relevant? Like to today, to modern day?
I think you'll find
it
certainly is.
Obviously, we fought him on that. And we can see now for good reason, you know, like literally it's still on people's lips.
Did you send him the video? You should have.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I want to. I don't think it will be received well.
Yeah.
I think that will go down like a couple cold sick. But I still might do it.
Do it.
Sorry.
I'm here for
I
violence.
literally never heard that in my life. What did you say? A cup of cold sick. That's so visceral.
Anyway, so yeah, I'd like people to be able to like join up these dots and understand how like the past affects today when it comes to the mixed experience, but not just the mixed experience, all of our experiences, like how these politics were literally created to segregate us, to separate us, to stop people mixing, to stop people migrating, like to literally prevent immigration. We were villainized and like made out to be monsters, and this happens, you know, this reoccurs in history and globally, not just in the UK but like everywhere, and it's just really interesting, I think, to be able to kind of like see the world in this way, like once you piece together these things. So yeah, that's my kind of geeky wish or want. But also, you know, of course this book is an ode to the mixed community that you've mentioned, and I hope that you know, anybody who's mixed reading it also gets those aha moments, like understands like, oh, okay, that's why I felt like that, or why I've experienced this.
I definitely did.
sure.
Yeah.
I want people to feel seen, but I also would love for them to get to the end of this book and feel like maybe they don't have to keep explaining themselves to people, and maybe they get to just say,
We can pray.
We can
yeah.
pray.
I mean, maybe that's too big a aim, but
Hey,
you
shoot
know.
big.
Exactly.
Emma, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me on your own podcast, Mixed Up. I'm going to end this episode by giving my recommendation for the culture mix, which is The Half of It by Nicole Okran and Emma Slade Edmondson. Don't know if you've heard of it, but it truly is such a necessary book, and I know that your audience are going to love it. I hope everyone is out queuing at midnight. Maybe not, but when the bookshop's open, like, head out and buy this book, because it's a worthy addition to any bookshelf, whether you're mixed, monoracial, none of the above. So thank you so much for writing it, and thank you for letting me speak to you today. I feel honoured.
Thank you for joining us. That was so lovely.